Hi, good evening. My name is Jean Pillow, and I am from the Eastern Connecticut Conservation District, and across the room is Maura Roby, my coworker. We're here tonight for the third in our Farm Talks at the Connecticut Grange series, and tonight our program is going to be, I think, one that you'll find interesting, especially because I think our speaker is a very interesting person. Didn't work. That didn't work. It's not advancing. For this. Oh, here we go. So the Eastern Connecticut Conservation District is a nonprofit organization. We were created by state statute. We have very specific obligations focused on soil and water conservation, but we do a lot of other projects. We write watershed plans. One of the reasons Maura and I decided to do this Farm Talk series is because we are currently engaged in developing an update to a watershed-based plan for Little River, which is here in Woodstock. And we also have other watershed-based plans nearby, as in the natural watershed, so it's the other side of Woodstock, and Eastford and whatnot. And all of them have similar components and similar water quality issues. And so we wanted to address those things and get people to understand about their actions and water quality. So we brought in these speakers to be addressing the issues that we're facing. And for those in the room, there is a display in the back there. If you want to read through it, you're welcome to at the end of the program. Sorry. So yes, for the 36 towns in the eastern side of Connecticut. So the Little River Watershed-based plan, again, we wrote the original one 2009. It's out of date, and there's more compliance issues for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in order to get the watershed designated a National Water Quality Initiative watershed, which is important for our farmers because then there's dedicated funding just for the watershed that they don't have to compete at a state level when they need assistance to do conservation work. So we're focusing on that tonight. And if you are a farmer or you have farm animals and you want to take part in our survey, we really would be interested if you would take time to do so. For those in the room, there is a card in the back with a QR code. All you have to do is scan your phone over it and the survey comes up. It'll take you a couple minutes to fill it out. For those that aren't, Maura will be sending out the link when she thanks you for attending the program. And now it's my honor to introduce Bill Reid. He's the Chief Ranger from the Last Green Valley. He's the current lead on a forest conservation project being funded by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service through their Regional Conservation Partnership Program. The focus of their project is accelerating the pace of conservation in the Southern New England Heritage Forest. Through this initiative, several large forested parcels are being conserved through conservation easements. All the funding for easements is already obligated, but there's still funding to help people who have forested land that are interested in doing forest management plans. And he'll explain what a forest management plan is and why you want to have one, why you should have one, and how you can get funding assistance in certain cases. He's been able to sign a lot of woodland owners up for plans already. And he's also been involved in arranging for bird habitat assessments, although I think that project part is over at this point. Oh, it's still part of it, good. So in addition to being involved with the Last Green Valley and the Forest and Forestry Initiative, Bill's also an active member of the Eastern Forest Landowners Association and the Wolf Den Land Trust. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce you to Bill Reid.
Thank you, Jean. Nice to be here. I've never been on this part of the building before. I've always been downstairs. This is great. Time to get up here more often. But anyway, thank you very much. What we're going to do is I'm going to run through some information about forest management plans that we have here in the opportunity here in the Last Green Valley. Learn about them a little bit and available resources to have one written for your forest property. But what I want to start with is simply looking at, it works. I'll try that one first. Good. We're going to start looking at landowner cover for our region. And this is information that came out of a 2016 national data land cover analysis. And then Brian Hall at Harvard Forest and crunched the data a little bit more into actual numbers. Last Green Valley area specifically, 706,000 acres, but 77% of that is in forested land. And that's our focus tonight. But when you include forested land and undeveloped land, we're really looking at over 87% undeveloped land when you include it with forest land. So it's a significant region that we have here at the Last Green Valley. Now we're going to take a look at this map again, and what we're going to do is we're going to look specifically at the towns that we sort of know. Hey, look at that, it works. There's Woodstock. Now keep in mind, the yellow is agricultural grassy land, and you can follow that agricultural swath right down sort of the Quinnebog River area valley, if you will. You know, we know South Woodstock up into East Woodstock is that sort of ancient alluvial plain, right? Is where is where there's no rocks. Well, perhaps not as many as there are out where I used to live in Woodstock Valley, when every hole in the ground pulled up a boulder. But what I want to draw your attention to is over here, Union, Ashford in particular, and Eastford. This is an area that is mostly forested land. This is our hill towns, right? Mostly forested land. And we know that our forests are critical wildlife habitat and also for forest products. But even more important, they provide buffers and act as nature's huge sponge for reducing runoff and pollutants that might otherwise end up in our waterways. And of course, they also provide us with oxygen while also storing and sequestering carbon to help mitigate climate change and our warming planet. Now, if you were to follow this region, this is basically the Natchog watershed, right? And you've got the Natchog River, and you've got the Mount Hope River and the Fenton River. And they follow all the way down through this watershed here, and the three of them dump into Mansfield Hollow, right? That's where they are supposed to end, but we know that the Natchog continues coming out of Mansfield Hollow. Now, these rivers are mostly clean thanks to the simple fact that they are forested rivers. They're not surrounded by a lot of open land. They're surrounded by forests. From Mansfield Hollow, the water flows into the Willimantic Reservoir, providing clean drinking water for thousands of people. And so it's just sort of highlighting the important story about water with the role that forests play. Now, let's talk a little bit about our forest land that we have here in southern New England. We are mostly a deciduous trees that represent the vast majority of types. We have oak, hickory, birch, and maple is really the dominant trees that we have in our region. Some ash species, so that's declining quite a bit as a result of the emerald ash borer, and some other conifers species, other deciduous species. Conifers, of course, are going to include your white pine, hemlock, and cedars and firs and the like. But conifers, they dominate our northern forests, our northern New England forests. Think about it. The main state flag, what's on it? A white pine tree. Connecticut, what's on our flag? A white oak, right? And so it's just sort of an indication of the importance of our region to those types of trees. So I also like to look at sort of, if that's what we have now, well, what's the history of it? You know, land has history, just like human beings have history. And so I like to look at our forest history by examining a wonderful exhibit up at the Harvard Forest in Petersham. It's the Fisher Museum, and these are dioramas. These are actually 3D dioramas, and these are photographs of them. And if you look at this image, that's Mount Wachusett. And so you're at the Harvard Forest facing south towards Mount Wachusett. And this is what the forest would have looked like before Europeans arrived, right? Much like some of our forest looks today. But by the 1740s, you're starting to get movement into the interlands, into areas like Petersham, clearing of land. And here's a farmer, he's got a little house, a little, one-story house, maybe a 2-acre field where he's going to plant his corn and potatoes and rye, a single cow, maybe 2 cows, maybe a couple of sheep. 1740. By 1830, this is what you're looking at. This is what you would have seen here. The land was, southern New England, the land was about 80% cleared land, right? So we know this story, right? But what happens with farm abandonment? What happens by 1850? When are our mill towns developed in this region, right? When is Putnam developed? When is Southbridge developed, right? When does that happen? Well, that's because of the rise of industry and using those rivers to power the Industrial Revolution. People are moving off the farms and going into other types of business, as well as, or moving west. The Erie Canal, what, 1820 or something like that? The Erie Canal opened. So access to farm goods coming out of that rich soil of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, that all begins to happen. So farm abandonment. And within 60 or 70 years, we're seeing the white pine is the first thing to come up. You know, nowadays, the white pine will come up once they get past the brambles and invasive species, but the white pine will come up. And so about 1910, the turn of the last century, this is what you're going to see. And eventually, the white pines will succeed. The hardwood is succeeded. The hardwood succeeds the white pine. And so this is why we have so many hardwoods in our region right now, because 100 years after these types of pictures were taken, this is what we mostly have in southern New England, is predominantly hardwoods, 100 or so years old, if not a little bit more. And so that's what the forests looked like then, and this is what it looks like today. They have grown back and together represent one of the most significant natural resources that we have in our region. And all we had to do was let it grow back. Mother Nature took care of the rest, right? Stand back, I got this, kids, right? And so nature did this for us. In fact, the regrowth of the eastern forest is globally one of the most significant ecological success stories. And I believe today it represents a critical key to the quality of life we enjoy here in New England. Now, so that's a little bit of a backstory. What types of trees do we have? And what's the history of our land? Now let's talk about forest management plans. Now, for me, the best way I can tell people about information is to relate it to myself. And I'll tell you a story what happened with my property in New Hampshire. And the best way to explain is the personal experience that we had on property in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. My grandparents purchased an antique house, barn, and outbuildings along with 144 acres in 1933. My father took ownership in 1968 after my grandparents passed and began a process of careful forest management that continues today. Now, Dad was a physician. He was a family doctor. He knew absolutely nothing about forests. In fact, he tried to grow Christmas trees, but didn't know there was a thing called an aphid that ate the center leader. And I helped him plant 3,000 Christmas trees, and well, it's another story. But what he did do, what he realized is that, you know, I was the youngest of four. I was 13 years old at the time. My oldest brother, Dave, was already in college. My sister, Bets, and brother, Rob, were soon to follow, and I was bringing up the rear. Dad knew to maintain and afford the property, to upkeep the antique structures, he needed income from the forest. He was very busy with his practice and very busy paying for college educations. So he did the smart thing. He sought out expertise, and he started with a visit to the Extension Service forester, who put him in contact with a certified forester to help develop a long-range plan, long-range stewardship management plan. So for 50 years and 2 different foresters, we have managed the land for growing mostly white pine, because that's what we had in that part of our land. Really likes to grow white pine. There are some hemlocks, some red oak, yellow birch, maple, and beech. And about every 5 to 10 years, we undertook a very judicious thinning and prescribed harvest in one of the specific forest stands. The foresters, when they do a complete analysis, they take your land and they break it out into different stands, which relate to the types of trees that are there, or the types of habitat that is there, whether it's the wetlands or this is predominantly pine or a mix of pine and hardwood. So we undertook that over a number of years. And that responsibility passed to me in 2006 and continues to this day. So I own the property now with my siblings. We share it together and continue to enjoy and virtually love our forest. The house and buildings that we enjoy were built by the pine that the first owners cut in the 1770s. I know this. In fact, we can even find the granite they cut off the land for the basement. We find the slabs of granite that they didn't haul up to the house. The forest, since then, for the last 50 years, it's paid for 3 new roofs, an upgrades to electric, plumbing, heating, septic, a new well, new bathrooms, interior finish, and exterior paint, and the list goes on and on. Now, the important lesson from all of this is that Dad contacted a professional certified forester. And that forester has been our advocate for the forest and for us. He helps us achieve the goals that we established together and for the long-term health and vitality of our forest. Now, I'll tell you, I'm the one who gets the mail for the house and the property. And each year I probably get 4 to 5 unsolicited letters from a local logger looking to make great money for me. Unbeknownst to the fact that I've been in forest management for 50 years. We like those letters a lot, and they're good for starting fires in the fireplace. Now, we completed that 5-decade cycle of selected harvesting of pine and completed a forest management plan in 2018. This is one that I contracted with our forester back in 2010. And over the next couple of years, we will engage with a new forester, ours is retiring, and establish a plan that we can pass on to our children and grandchildren. It will focus on bird and wildlife habitat, suggestions for invasive species mitigation, and projections of possible future harvest. The land is the gift our father gave to us, and one we will give to our children and to our grandchildren. Now, let's turn to the reason we're here tonight, information on the Southern New England Heritage Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and to help you obtain a forest management plan with a bird habitat assessment. That's it. The forest management plan and bird habitat assessment are provided to qualifying forest landowners. It's something you can apply for. And this is through our Southern New England Heritage Forest Program. That's a 5-year project funded. We're now in our 4th year, entering our 4th year of doing forest management plan and bird habitat assessments. Awarded by the Natural Resources Conservation Service through their Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And so the map that you're looking at is a 3-state map of the Southern New England Heritage Forest. These are our Connecticut towns encompassing all of the Lash Green Valley and a little bit of extra over here. Recognize a little bit extra towns there, John, you probably do. These are Massachusetts towns in the Lash Green Valley, but the Massachusetts component goes all the way up to Quabbin Reservoir. And then Rhode Island towns in Western Rhode Island. Now, if I was to go back and show you that same land cover map, showing you just the Lash Green Valley towns, you'd find it looks very much the same as this, except that we have larger developed areas in the greater Worcester area up here. This is Worcester, this is Boston, obviously Providence. So you see all this red, that's developed land. This is all forested farmland and the developed down the highways and the like. And so you can see the critical nature of why our forest is so important, because we're surrounded by millions and millions of people. And just in the Lash Green Valley alone, there's somewhere about 320,000 residents in the 26 towns. Oh no, in the 35 towns of the Lash Green Valley. So that's what this regional conservation partnership. Now, the process that we undertake to get your forest management plan is much the same as if you were to apply directly to NRCS for an what's called an environmental quality incentive program. It's incentivized because they provide cost share funding to help you pay for this. And it can pay a significant portion of the cost of the forest management. In this program, a professional forester a certified forester will walk your property and coordinate with Audubon, Connecticut to produce high quality forest management plan with a bird habitat assessment. The plan will contain recommendations for management measures that align with your goals with your property, for your property, and the plan will meet federal and state requirements that may be used to apply for property tax reductions at the local level where it applies. Now, those of you that have land and are already in what's called PA 490, that's an important way for you to reduce the amount of tax burden on your farmland and on your forest lands. However, the requirement is you have a forest management plan if you're going to apply for it as forest land. So Public Act 490 is an important way to save on the property tax. Grant funds are available to pay for most of the forester's costs and to completely fund the bird habitat assessments. As a landowner, you will be responsible for choosing the forester from an approved list and paying for a percentage of the total cost of the plan. Typically, this is about 30% of the cost of the plan. With the program itself, the cost share 70% of the cost. So it's a significant saving, and the bird habitat assessment is paid in full. You get that at no cost. And this program is really ideally suited for landowners who have never had a forest management plan, or maybe have one that's very out of date, need a new one. And in particular, those that have 10 acres or more of woodlands. Now, while the project funds provided by NRCS and the Southern New England Heritage Forest Conservation Partnership, the Last Green Valley is the management entity for this funding for this program. You don't have to go directly to NRCS. And I am the contact for the Connecticut contact for forest landowners. Now, the forest management plan is done by the certified forester who follows the NRCS forest management plan guidelines. And this is an important part of this. The guidelines have to follow what they call a CAP 106 forest management plan. And that's because that plan will detail out a lot of other natural resources conservation types of conservation practices that you can then take that management plan and say, see, I have a certified forester told me that I need to do this, this, this. And what's the cost share components that you can help me pay for that? And so that plan has to detail which of those cost share components are available for NRCS. So it's a seamless transition from the forest management plan that follows the CAP 106 guidelines to then talking back to NRCS and getting someone out there to help you determine where can you apply for cost share funds. So that's really important. And that component, the conservation practices part of our program, is managed directly by NRCS. I would then hand you off to someone at NRCS. So how do we get started? All right. Now, you need to contact your local farm service agency. So it doesn't end with me. I'm not just going to hand you an application, say, hey, go fill this out and send it back to me. Before filling out your application, you need to contact the local farm service agency, FSA, to set up an appointment and visit with them. And you need to fill out a few forms that enables you to receive the cost share funds from NRCS. FSA office will also help you get a farm and tract number. That's really the most important thing. Without the farm and tract number, your application is not complete with me. All right. So you need to talk to them sooner than later. You get a farm and tract number, and that puts you into the system where you can then start to receive cost share funding through the NRCS, through the Farm Service Agency. This is federal funding, so you need to have that land sort of logged in with its own farm and tract number. There are other forms to be filled out. Also, there's an adjusted gross income form. There's also a customer data worksheet. That's the first thing you fill out. And then also a form of highly erodible land form also. But the most important one is the adjusted gross income form. You are asking the government to help you care for your land. And they're going to give you 75% of the cost to do that, or 70% of the cost to do that. So the adjusted gross income form asks you two important things: your social security number and whether the previous year you earned $900,000 more or less. And it's sort of, it's supposed to be chuckling now because that's usually what happens. People chuckle. And the reason is that if you earn more than $900,000, then you probably don't need the $1,000 of cost share funding from the government. So it's a simple fact. Now the Farm Service Agency is located on Westcott Road in Danielson, but you really should call them. The number is listed on the screen, and ask for Claire, and her extension number is there. Tell her that you attended this program, that you're part of the Last Green Valley program with NRCS and Southern New England Heritage Forest, and she'd be happy to then help you with that process. Now, remember that if you don't want to go through this program with us, you can still talk to them about getting an EQIP application for a forest management plan. But you're still going to have to go through this process if you're going to get the cost sharing. Or if you don't want to do that at all, you can get a list of certified foresters in the state of Connecticut and just start making phone calls. That's what my dad did. You know, we didn't go through NRCS when we got our forest management plans up in New Hampshire. I kind of wish I had done that back in 2010. But in any case, you can always do that without going through this type of program. The application deadline is December 17th. I highly recommend that you get this started sooner than later. Make that phone call. And again, the first contact is the Farm Service Agency. But also let me know if you can tonight, or those that are watching from home, send me an email. Let me know if you're interested in this program, because I'll go ahead and call Claire ahead of the time and let her know that that this is something that you're doing. And there's my my contact information. I also welcome the opportunity to visit you in person or over over the phone. You can find more information on our website, lashgreenvalley.org. And you scroll along the top, there's a section called Learn and Protect. Scroll over that, and up will come Agriculture and Forest page. Click on Southern New England Heritage Forest, and you'll find application information there. I also have applications here for folks to take with them this evening, or you can simply email those who are watching at home, and I'll email them to you. So what happens after you submit this thing? What happens then? Well, nothing happens with the application until Claire contacts me and says they qualify through their AGI. So the IRS has to say, yes, they qualify. And once that flag is raised, even though that may come in after your application comes in, that's when I will then get in touch with them. And until then, there's really nothing I can do. And that's why it's important that if you're going to do this, you do this sooner than later. 2 years ago, at the government shutdown, everything came to a halt with us being able to get AGI moving forward. And so it can take some time, but apparently the process is speeding up now. And Claire tells me there's a different process they're using now, so hopefully it'll go a little bit faster. So I'll contact you and I'll provide you with a list of foresters involved in the program and their contact information. It's about 10 or 15. It's your job to contact them, and I can't tell you who I think you should contact, because I can't favor one over the other. And these are certified foresters that have agreed to come into this program. And they know that they're going to be working with some smaller parcels, and they know that your objectives may not be a timber sale. It's going to be what's going on with my land. And they know that you're going to get a bird habitat assessment from Audubon. And that habitat assessment is going to be forwarded to the forester. And the forester is either going to provide that as an addendum to his plan, or he's going to fold those recommendations into that CAP 106 plan. And I have a sample of one of those plans with me that you can look at, but I can't give it to you to take home. But I've got a sample of that you can look at. I'm also going to provide you with the payment schedule. The payment schedule for forest management plans is going to give you a sense of what this is going to cost. And what happens is the NRCS determines the cost basis on last year's average cost per acre. So they take a look at the plans that were done last year. What was the average cost per acre? And then they say, okay, if that's at 50 acres, what's 70% of that? That's what we'll pay. If that's 100 acres, what's 70% we'll pay at that? And so the other thing you then get is a contract. And the contract is for you, the forester, Audubon, and the Last Green Valley. And it's on that, there's a lot of verbiage there, but it's the title page where the forester and you have said, here's what this is going to cost the forester. This is what the forester is going to charge. And here's the cost shared number based upon what NRCS payment schedule is. And here's what the Audubon habitat's going to cost. Guess what? That's not paid to you at all. And here's the balance. Here's the balance between what NRCS will pay the forester and what the forester's cost. Right? So typically it's going to be about 30%. I've got last year's numbers with me. I don't have the 2022 numbers yet from NRCS, so I can give you a sense of what they are. But you know, if the management plan for 25 acres to 30 acres or so costs $1,000. 700 of that will be covered, and you'll be responsible for about 300 of it. So that's sort of what you might expect. You also know the process can take some time. It's going to take about a year from when you actually sign the contract. Because here's what happens. I'm going to get you this information in January, late December and January. You've got to contact the forester, contact Audubon, set up time to meet with them, get ready with them to sign a contract, determine what you're going to do. The Audubon's not going to go onto the property until the spring. They want to be there when the migrating songbirds are coming. These are exceptionally well-trained ornithologists. Sight, sound, they understand what bird that is. But they also know the habitat that those birds rely on. So their plan is about a 30, 35-page plan, listing all the types of species that they saw and the types of species that might be there and the type of habitat that you have. And so it's a very detailed plan. And the forester's plan also has a lot of detail in it. There's pictures, there's information on the types of trees you have, how much board feet. There's maps showing the different stands that you have. This is predominantly pine. This is, where's your wetlands? They're going to talk about the types of invasive species that you have, of plants in particular, and make some recommendations for how you can improve that forest land. That plan, when it's done, comes back to you for review with the forester. And if this meets your agreement with what you understood would be, you then sign it. But we're not done yet. It has to go to NRCS to be approved. They want to make sure that it follows that CAP 106 plan, and wants to make sure that it can be a seamless process for you to then go back to NRCS and say, okay, there's some things I need to do with my property. And so again, it's going to take a year at least. And these are busy people. This is in addition to what these folks at Audubon, Connecticut are already doing. Our foresters are very, very busy in this region. Just to make sure you're clear as well, because we're up here in Northeast Connecticut, there's two Audubons in Connecticut. There's the Connecticut Audubon Society that we know down here in Pomfret, and there's got properties. They are our state Audubon. And then there's Audubon Connecticut, which is the national affiliate. And so that's the group that we are involved with this program. So that's the process that we're going to be going through over the next year. This is the 4th year doing the program. There is money enough left over for us to continue with the program this year. I'm already engaged with 9 different landowners. I already have 4 applications in. I don't know what's happened with their AGIs. I haven't heard if their AGIs has been approved yet. And we may end up with 20 or 30 applications this year, which would be huge. I don't know if we're going to have enough foresters to do all that in a timely fashion. So that will be a bit of a challenge. We'll see how many applications we get in this year, and I'll know more of that as we go along. So in closing, let me just go back to my experience. In 2033, we would have owned our property for 100 years, and I'll be 78. Don't do the math. Yes, I have a Medicare card already. And I expect and certainly hope that I'll be walking those same forest trails as I did as a kid. I'll be checking for the health of the trees, and I'll be listening to the birds, and I'll be on the lookout for invasive species and plants. Goodness gracious, we've got plenty of those. And I'll be looking for the track and scat of deer and turkey and coyote, bear, fisher, bobcat. We've got snowshoe hare. We've got it all. And I'll pause and I'll feel the forest, and I'll listen to the wind through the trees, because that's what that place means to me. So with that, I will entertain some questions. Are we going to do questions that came in on the chat first? Is that the...
Open space as opposed to park. That's gonna be up to the-
Yeah, I'm not the expert on PA 490. There are plenty of people that can provide.
Any questions?
Yeah, John.
So when you spoke about activity of the property, you spoke about temporary use, making there too.
Oh, river, yeah. Yep.
So what about, say, we have a 30-acre parcel in this property,
Mhm.
but it's, I think,
Got it.
activity is, I mean, we're in species.
Right.
Is that the kind of thing you just brought up?
Without a doubt. And I think when you meet with the forester and Audubon, that's some of the things you need to know. What are the bird-friendly species, and in particular, what are the non-friendly species? You know, we know that our invasive species of barberry and you know, you name it, autumn olive, they get those beautiful berries and the birds eat the berries, and that's why we have so much of them. But we also know that those plants do not evolve with these birds, and they do not provide the type of nutrition that these birds require from our native plants. And so there's great recommendations. If you've got wetlands, maybe they think winterberry might be a nice thing to put in there, which is great for birds in sort of in the shoulder season and the winter season. But yeah, that's the type of question that you would want to ask directly to them and make sure that's part of your plan. And if not, remind them that I want this as part of it. I'm sorry. Yeah, what I was just responding to was a gentleman who has almost 40 acres, and quite a bit of it is in wetlands, and they're really interested in plant species that are good for birds. And my indication was that yes, that's something that you can ask specifically for the forester recommendations and for Audubon recommendations. Yeah, right over here. Nope. Oh, you were just stretching. All right. Are there more in the chat? Right. What are some of the goals and objectives in forest management plans? Good forest management plan is going to tell you what you have for trees. It's going to tell you what kind of trees they are. It's going to tell you where they're located. It's going to be a map of that. And it may give you a sense of what the value is. And there's other ways that you can find the value. So a forest management plan is going to do that. But it's also going to make some recommendations that perhaps this part of the forest, you've got some younger trees, a nice catch of oaks that have come up with a heavy mass we had 3-4 years ago, or a nice catch of young pines that have come up from the large number of pine trees or pine, but they need more sunlight. And so they want to do what's called a thinning to bring more sunlight down into the soil. They also are going to look at your land and see, you know, are you overstocked? Are there more trees? Are there so many trees that the trees aren't healthy, or that they're all shooting straight up and all you've got is these pine trees with tiny little bits of green on the top and it's just a skinny pole? If that's the case, they're going to recommend a thinning. What we don't like to see is what we have predominantly here is really sort of even age forest. You know, this is forest that we haven't done anything with for many, many years in some cases. And so a forest management plan wants to see, you know, where you've got open areas, an open field, or the trees all right up against it, and they're all straight up. Well, that's not great for birds. Birds want smaller branches to perch on. So they might recommend a thinning and letting some of the smaller material come up on that edge habitat. So there's any number of things that can be recommended in a forest management plan. But again, you need to make sure you're clear with the forester what your sense of and what your goals are. What do you want out of this? And he'll try to craft that plan for you, while also educating you more about what you've got, and what some of the needs might be, what some of the problems might be, and how to mitigate that. Is that helpful? Great. Yes. What happens if you enter into a forest management plan and you have to sell the property before the plan is complete? That's a good question. And it's probably one that I would have to defer to somebody else that manages the program more than I do. I suppose if the new landowner is happy that that's what's going on and be happy to, I mean, the contract would have to be amended is the issue with it. And so that needs to be taken into consideration before you do this program. If you're thinking of selling your land in the near future, this might not be the best program, would be my guess.
And another question, I've actually taken myself off of mute so they can hear me. Did you mention how many foresters are working with the Audubon ECRS program you described?
Right. There's over 10 that are working with this program right now. They're ones that we selected. We wanted certified foresters, and we wanted those that were familiar with CAP 106. Some foresters that were not familiar with it, but the landowner had worked in the past. I provided them with the information. NRCS was great to here's what a CAP 106 looks like, and these are the requirements, and so that's worked out fine. We will probably need more this year. We'll see how many foresters, how many plants they're able to do. So we have a lot of applications this year. We may need more foresters, and I'll be looking in the next couple of weeks to see if there are other forces we can attract to the program. It's all the questions? All right, great. Well, for those who are here, I've got some materials I can pass out and share with you. This is the actual application itself and some of the checklists that you'll need to do as you think about the program. I also have a sample plan that you can look at. Any other questions to the visiting folks with Zoom, please feel free to call me. You've got my contact information, the phone number of the office is right there on the screen. Send me an email. Again, I'd be happy to come walk your property and learn more about it. And that helps me as I start to understand it, in particular, as I communicate back to Audubon about what to expect. So with that, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you for attending, and good night.
Thank you very much.